Hi, this is Mrs. Show. Today we're going to learn how to identify numbers as rational or irrational. So in your notebook, I need you to write down the word rational. First, we're going to talk about rational numbers. Please write this in your notebook so you can look back at it when you take your quiz today. Okay, a rational number is a number that can be written as a fraction. So if you can write it as a fraction, it is a rational number. So take a minute and write this in your notebook. Rational numbers are numbers that can be written as fractions. Anytime during this video, if I go too fast, just pause it so you can get caught up with your notes and then hit play when you're ready to move on. So some examples of rational numbers that you want to write in your notebook are 1/3, because it is a fraction. 7 would be a rational number because you can write it as 7/1. -2 would be a rational number because you can write it as -2/1. Also, decimals that end like 0.16 is rational because you can write it as 16/100, because the 1 is in the tenths, the 6 is in the hundredths. So if you can write it as a fraction, it is a rational number. Also, some square root problems are rational, like the square root of 25 or the square root of 36. Because the square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 36 is 6. So you can write 5 as 5/1. You can write 6 as 6/1. So if you can take that number and write it as a fraction, it is rational. Okay, irrational numbers are numbers that are equal to decimals that do not end and do not repeat. So in your notes, write the word irrational. Okay, under irrational, write non-repeating. That means it doesn't repeat. Okay, or it could be non-terminating. Non-terminating means it doesn't end. So non-repeating or non-terminating decimals. That's what irrational numbers are. They're non-terminating or non-repeating. Take a minute and pause the video if you need a few more seconds to write this down. When you're ready, hit play. Okay, so some examples would be like a 1.1236794, and it's just a decimal that keeps going and it doesn't repeat. It doesn't have the same numbers over and over again. Pi is irrational because remember, pi is 3.1415. It's actually a decimal that keeps going. We just round it to 3.14 when we use 3.14. Some other examples of irrational numbers would be like the square root of 37. If you took the square root of 37 on a calculator, it wouldn't be a whole number. It would be a decimal that kept going and doesn't repeat. You can try that on your calculator right now if you want to pause the video and do the square root of 37 to see what decimal that would be. But it's going to be a little over 6. It's going to be a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. So another example would be like the square root of 24. Well, there's not a whole number times itself to give you 24, so that's a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. If you took the square root of 24 on a calculator, you'd get a decimal that kept going and didn't repeat. All right, so we're going to classify some numbers. And one more thing, under rational, why don't you put a repeating decimal? Like 0.3 with a bar above the 3 means it repeats. If it repeats, it's rational, because a 3 repeating is actually the same as a 1/3. If a decimal repeats, you can write it as a fraction. All right, So I just want you to put your pencil down and watch this page, and then I'm going to have you try some in a minute. So the directions are, is the number rational or irrational? Well, if I look at this, I can write 5 as 5 over 1. Since I can write it as 5 over 1, it is rational. Negative 6, can I write it as a fraction? Yes, I can write it as negative 6 over 1. Since I can write it as a fraction, it is rational. 0.2, could I write it as a fraction? Well, yes, I know the 2 is in the tenths place. This 2 right here is in the tenths, so this is equal to 2/10. So since I can write it as a fraction, it is rational. If I look at number 4, it's a negative 0.5 with a bar above the 5, means it keeps repeating. So if it repeats, I can write it as a fraction. It is rational. This fraction is actually 5/9. If you took a calculator and did 5 divided by 9, you would get a 5 repeating. But what you need to know is if it repeats, it is rational because you can make it a fraction. Number 5 is also rational because it is a fraction. And number 6 is also rational because I can make it improper, right? I can make it an improper fraction because it is a mixed number. All right, I want you to look at number 7. Directions say, is the number rational or irrational? Well, I'm noticing number 7 is a decimal that keeps going. The numbers are not repeating, so it is irrational. This is an irrational number. Square root of 9 on number 8, square root of 9 equals 3. Since it equals 3, 3 is the same as 3 over 1, it is rational. I can write it as a fraction, it's rational. Number 9, square root of 6. Is there a number times itself to give you 6? No. If I took the square root of 6 on a calculator, it would actually be a decimal that kept going and didn't repeat. So this is irrational. So anytime you have a square root of a number that's not a perfect square number, it's going to be irrational. Number 10, do you think it's rational or irrational? That 8 over 9. It is rational because you can write it as a fraction, it's rational. Remember number 11, this is the pi symbol. This is pi. Pi is 3.1415 and it keeps going. So since it's a decimal that keeps going and doesn't repeat, it is irrational. What do you think about number 12? It is rational. Good. The reason it's rational is because you could write it as an improper fraction. You could go 2 times 7 is 14, plus 3 is 17. I can write it as 17 over 7, so it's rational. All right, what I want you to do on your paper is 13 through 18. I want you to write the examples, and I want you to write the word rational or irrational. All right? And when you get done, you're going to play the video again. So go ahead and pause now. Take your time, try 13 through 18. When you get done, hit play. Okay, so let's check. Square root of 3. There's not a whole number times itself to give you 3. 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4. So this is irrational. If you took a calculator and did the square root of 3, it would be a decimal that kept going and didn't repeat. Number 14, square root of 25, that equals 5. I can write 5 as 5 over 1, so it is rational. Number 15, let's see how you did. Notice 4 is repeating. That bar means it's repeating. So if it repeats, I can write it as a fraction. If I can write it as a fraction, it is rational. All right, number 16 is the same as negative 5 over 1. So since I can write it as a fraction, it's rational. Number 17 is a fraction, so I'm going to call it rational. And number 18, the square root of 17, Well, there's not a number times itself to give me 17. 4 times 4, 4 squared is 16. 5 times 5, 5 squared is 25. The square root of 17 is a number that's a little more than 4, and it's going to be a decimal that keeps going and doesn't repeat. So it is irrational. So this is an irrational number. All right, I want you to pause the video again and try 19 through 24 on your paper. Please take your time. Write the problem and the answer. Write rational or irrational. When you get done with 19 through 24, hit play. All right, now that you're back, let's see how you did on 19. This is 0.3, so this is 3/10. So since I can write it as a fraction, it is rational. All right, now number 20, these 3 dots mean that it keeps going. It's non-terminating. It doesn't end. And I'm noticing that the numbers do not repeat. So if they do not repeat, it is irrational. 21, what's the square root of 81? 9, right. Can we write 9 as a fraction? Yes, that's the same as 9 over 1. So this is a rational number. All right, 22. Could I write negative 3.5 as a fraction? Yes, this is negative 3 and 5/10. So this is rational. 23 is a fraction, so it is rational. 24, I could write it as an improper fraction. 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3. This is 3 over 2. Since I can write it as a fraction, it is rational. All right, next question. I want you to put in A, B, C, or D. So the question is, which one of these does not represent a rational number? That really means which one's irrational. Put A, B, C, or D down. All right, let's see how we did. So I'm trying to pick the one that cannot be written as a fraction. Well, negative 4 is negative 4 over 1. 0.5 is 5/10. 2/5 is a fraction. So all of these are rational. A, B, and C are rational. The irrational one, or the one that's not rational, is the square root of 15. This would be a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. Okay, look at our next question. Question is, which one is an irrational number? On your paper, write A, B, C, or D. Which one is irrational? Okay, let's check. So actually the answer is A. Because B is rational because it is a fraction. Square root of 16 is 4. I can write 4 as 4 over 1. That's rational. And part D, 0.7 repeating, can be written as a fraction because it repeats. It's actually the fraction 7/9, so it's rational. If you did 7 divided by a 9 on a calculator, you'd get a 7 repeating. All right, let's try another one of these. The question is, which one is a rational number? If you need to pause the video, you can. Think about which one is rational. Put A, B, C, or D on your paper. All right, let's check. So I'm trying to pick the one that is a fraction. If it's rational, I can write it as a fraction. Well, right off, I'm noticing, hey, B is 3/8. That is a fraction. We know pi is irrational because it's 3.1415 on and on and on. C is irrational because it's a decimal that keeps going and doesn't repeat. And D is irrational because there's not a whole number times itself to give you the square root of 21 or to give you 21. So this would be a decimal that kept going and didn't repeat. All right, so how are you feeling today about rational and irrational numbers? 3, you totally get it. 2, you sort of do. 1, not really. Okay, if you are a 1, you have time to go back and watch this video again and take good notes before you take your quiz. If you are a 3, go ahead and take your quiz. If you are a 2, you might want to go back to the beginning, okay, and watch at least half the video before you take your quiz today. It should be an easy quiz and you should do well. If you get done with your quiz early, what I want you to do is make sure you have your February evaluate completed for math. Also check Skyward, see if you have any missing assignments you need to work on. Check Big Ideas, check the Overdue tab there. And if you have a quiz we've done in the last 2 weeks that you want a better score on, you can redo that quiz. That will help your grade. Have a good day.